Swimming like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hey everyone, I'm Mark Scribner, your host in my virtual office in downtown Boston today with my co-host Christopher Collins, who's in Jamaica Plain in the dining room today. How are you doing,
Yeah,
Chris?
Mark, I took up residence here at the dining room, trying to get some work done. It's a great day to look out the back window and the back door, and it's great birds, great foliage, and I'm really kind of excited about our guest today.
Yeah, I am as well. So I'd like to remind all our guests that we're now actually the #1 rated entrepreneur show in Boston. You can find this show as well as past episodes on Shrimp Tank podcast.com/Boston. We're nationally syndicated through iHeart, currently broadcasting in something like 13 cities, and now we're an international show, Canada specifically, and growing very, very fast. And what we do here is we get to interview some of the brightest and smartest business owners, small business owners, CEOs, I would say in Boston, but now it's expanded to in and around New England. So it's growing very, very fast. And what I would like to do is tell you a little bit about our guest today. He's a very, very interesting gentleman. Chris and I, in our day jobs, get to interact with a lot of attorneys via our work. And Richard has a very unique approach to what he does. He's a personal injury attorney in Boston. And one of the neat things about what he's able to do is he also worked on the other side of the fence, representing insurance companies. So very valuable asset for him because he knows how the insurance companies work, how they might approach a case, and it's just a very big advantage. Also, too, what I found very interesting, again, speaking to a lot of attorneys, is he has a really good idea how to market and to pivot his business, and especially in COVID with some of the things that are going on with people not driving, et cetera. Obviously, like all of us, we've had to learn to reinvent ourselves and pivot and be able to solve client problems. So with that said, Richard, thanks for being our guest today. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I alluded to, we're in Massachusetts. We just entered into phase 1, which is a little precarious. Not a lot of people understand what that means, I think. Personally, I think the governor's done a pretty good job under the circumstances. However, the small business and the folks that we get to talk to, they're obviously suffering dramatically, the restaurants, the small business type of people. But how has that this impacted your business with personal injuries?
Well, basically with everyone in isolation, there are fewer people out on the roads. So obviously the volume of incidents with respect to the car collisions and bicycle collisions and also construction site accidents and things like that has definitely dropped. Interestingly, I heard a statistic a couple of weeks ago that although the traffic is down, the per capita collision and injury rate is up because people are out there speeding away. But the total number of incidents is down, which, hey, listen, let's face it, that's better for the public. Personal injury attorneys, we're just one step above the undertaker as far as when people want to use us.
Yeah. So is ambulance chaser a bad thing to call you, or do you hear that?
Oh, I hear it all the time. And that's why I tell people, I go to meetings, I wear hiking boots to meetings. People ask me why I don't wear formal shoes. I say, because when I'm chasing the ambulance and it takes a turn, I got to keep traction. I can't spin out.
Love it. That's really good. That's really good.
So does that negatively affect the business, or is that something you can, take and say, hey, what?
It's a stereotype. You got to roll with it. I can't change perception, so I just roll with it.
So how, I guess probably looking at this pre-COVID, post-COVID, we all see the billboards, like the major marketing for personal injury, where, and the same thing in our respective works, where we have to separate ourselves from service. But maybe could you give some idea pre-COVID how you marketed yourself and how you're marketing yourself now?
So my marketing is all based on personal relationships. Along those lines, I mean, my firm, and we have a website, but frankly, the website is not there to attract business with respect to digital marketing, search engine optimization, things like that. People tell me I should do those things, but I have been very successful building relationships. You know what? It's slower. It takes time, but I think in the long run, it's better because what happens is someone gets referred to me and they just call me because they're referred by somebody I know well. And that person says, you need to call Richard Mandel. And when they call me, they're not calling 6 other attorneys. They're not kicking the tires. they're most likely calling me to retain me. They're calling me with the attitude of, it's my case to lose. It's not, I have to fight for the case. So there's a complete shift there in respect to the attitude of the client, potential client, when they contact me. And, you know, I'm very fortunate. I've joined a couple of networking organizations, and it basically creates an opportunity for me to build these relationships. And I have an opportunity to build relationships with a lot of lawyers and other professional advisors, trusted advisors to their clients, such that when something happens, that advisor would refer that client over to me, and the client just takes their advisor's advice because it's a trusted advisor.
Yeah, and can you give some examples of some networking things that you've tried and worked in the past?
So the one I'm involved with heavily right now, it's an organization called Provisors. It started in Southern California probably about 30 years ago. National, it's gone national now. It was up and down California. It's in Seattle, Atlanta, Chicago, going into New York City now. And it basically is about trusted advisors. They want experienced, trusted advisors. And, you know, as I tell people, a networking organization is only what you make it. It's a vessel. It's a structure. It's really what you do within that structure that's up to you. But basically, it gives you the carte blanche, or the cloaks you with the authority to just reach out to people randomly and say, hey, I see you're a member of Provisors in another group. And there's a number of groups around New England. So I don't know everybody in New England. New England probably has almost 700 members in it. It stretches from Manchester down to Providence and up to Portsmouth. So it cloaks you with that ability to just call somebody, send an email, hey, I see you're in Provisors, you're in this group. I'd love to sit down with you and talk. And they accept it because they're there to meet people too. Whereas if you just tried that with somebody, some random person, we'll see how far you get. Your email goes right to the trash.
Right. Right.
So Richard, obviously the bottom line of the goal is to get business, to generate business out of those groups. You feel like at the end of the day, you're meeting your needs as far as, you know, generating, you know, some traffic?
Oh, definitely. What happens is, you know, business generation based on personal relationships takes time. And the group has a mantra, we'll call it. It's know, like, trust, refer. It's a spectrum. I mean, you need to get to know people first. You need to like them. You need to trust them. And then you refer them, because let's face it, if you are going to refer somebody to another professional, and you might be referring your best client, and yes, you're doing that professional a favor, but if that professional drops the ball, that reflects really badly on you with your client.
Sure.
So it's really critical to build those relationships, to build that trust. And it turns out that you become friends with a lot of these people. And let's face it, who doesn't want to do business with their own friends?
Yeah.
Just curious, how did you flick the switch and kind of go to the other side? You went from working within the insurance companies on their side to, you know, being the adversary, you know, the foil.
So I started my career in insurance defense in small law firms for about 6 years or so, 7 years. And then I left those firms and I went straight to work for an insurance company in what is called the staff counsel office. So I'm working for the insurance company, but staff counsel is different than internal counsel, corporate counsel, in that we don't handle internal matters. What the insurance companies do is they simply hire attorneys. They're on the insurance company payroll, but you handle the cases as if you're an outside law firm.
Oh.
But you work very closely with the insurance company claims representatives. So I did that for about 7 years. And what prompted me to go out on my own, well, frankly, it was a swift kick out the door. But, you know, it's one of those things that when it happens, the attorneys to insurance companies are very fungible assets. And, you know, it's all about numbers. And when your salary goes up too much, they can hire someone else. But the swift kick out the door is something that, frankly, I wish it happened sooner, because once you start your own practice, you look back on it and you say, God, I wish I had done that 10 years ago. I'd be 10 years ahead now.
So what are some of the challenges as you're out on your own running a business as compared to, you know, your W-2 employee? You have all your benefits, you have your 401k, all that stuff. But do you have any comparison other than, you know, owning your own shop and dictating the direction you're going to go? But what are some of the pros and the cons versus being a corporate attorney versus running a company like you are?
Well, I mean, the pros, I'm a solo practitioner. I'm of counsel with another attorney with that attorney's firm. We're colleagues. We're not partners, but we do a lot of work together, and we've referred cases to each other and worked on them individually. But, you know, certainly the cons are when I take a vacation, I'm not paid. I don't have such a thing as paid vacation. You know, I'm fortunate. My wife is professionally employed and we can get benefits through my wife. So that takes a huge burden off my shoulder. It took a huge burden off my shoulders when I started my practice. But, you know, I think it's all about advantages, frankly, because I am control my own caseload. I control my own destiny. The problem is I don't just have to do the work. I have to generate the work.
Okay, Richard, sorry about we had some technology issues, but we're picking up on your pipeline. And one of the things that you were just speaking about is the fact that you not only have to do the work, but you also have to generate the business, which is, you're wearing multiple hats. You're HR, you're tech, and lead gen, and obviously an expert attorney. So how do you balance all that and try to grow and continue to get cases? Well,
I'm first of all very fortunate because in addition to getting benefits through my wife, she's in IT. So I don't have to deal with the tech.
Great.
If something, she always jokes with me, if something goes wrong with my computer, I just hand out the computer to her, I hand it over and say, fix please, and she takes care of it.
So does she cook as well?
She does. She's wonderful.
Oh,
She's a triple threat.
Very fortunate.
Keeper.
Benefits, IT, and she can cook. She's a keeper.
She's been a wonderful cook through this whole presentation thing.
That's great. That's
great.
But
the issue with the pipeline is that, you know, as I was saying right before the cutout, the lifespan of a case could be 2, 3, or 4 years.
Wow.
So you're always concerned about how long it's going to take and have cases in the pipeline at various levels of maturity. And if you don't keep that pipeline going, you develop an air bubble in the pipeline. So you can't do these pivots that some people do where they network a lot, they get very busy, they pull off on the networking, they do the work, then they go back to networking.
Right.
The people that can do that have the ability in their business if it's short-term work. In other words, the work comes in and they immediately get paid for it. If it's billable hour and they immediately get remunerated for it.
So I had a quick question. So, you know, if your cases are going to last that long, you're making a determination, you know, what kind of case you want. And obviously you're trying to figure out the probability of how successful it will be. But my understanding is sometimes these cases are going to require experts and a lot of capital sometimes. It could be anything. It could be a neurologist. It could be a reconstruction person. So do you have to front that capital during that 2 or 3 years? And then when you do, like, what's the overall percentage of success? Or is that not possible to determine?
So when we intake a case, we try to review it for probability of success. We're not going to take a case we don't feel we can prevail upon. We don't feel we can see a return on. There are a number of cases that I've turned away because maybe the case has some legal value, but the business value isn't there. The time it would take, the expenses that would go into it. But, you know, Mark, you're absolutely right. The expenses in a case can be huge, and you have 2 types of experts. You have liability experts and you have damages experts. And frankly, you know, you could have a number of damages experts. You know, your liability expert on a product's liability case will be an engineer. Your damages experts might be 1 or 2 different doctors. It could be a neurologist and orthopedist who are opining on permanency. And then you might need a vocational rehabilitation specialist if there's a permanent loss of earnings. And then you might need an economist to reduce the future loss of earnings down to a present value for the jury. So the cost of experts can get very out of hand very quickly in larger cases. And you know what? You can take a case, you can take it to trial, and you can lose. And it has happened. No matter doing everything perfectly, it's in the jury's hands and just doesn't work. It's completely in the jury's hands. You know, some of the cases are weaker. I'll tell you, you know, insurance companies, plaintiffs, attorneys that have strong cases, insurance companies usually settle. Insurance companies will only take the cases to trial that they feel are weak plaintiff cases. So, you know, obviously if you have a great case, it's going to resolve. It's going to resolve at mediation prior to the trial, or it will resolve shortly before trial if the parties negotiating directly. So the cases that end up at trial, you know, it's funny, you hear some of these trial statistics. And when I was a younger associate showing up for pretrial conferences, I remember showing up in one courtroom and the judge looked at me. I'm sorry, no, this wasn't as a young associate. This was early on in my plaintiff career. Judge looks at me and says, "Mr. Mandel, do you know when the last time I saw a plaintiff verdict was in my courtroom?" And it's like, it's been about 7 years. And I almost wanted to say, well, Judge, that's because the insurance company settles all their weak cases.
Mhm.
And that's why. So you hear these statistics about plaintiff verdicts and defense verdicts, and they're really skewed because that's on the cases that go to trial, but you have to look at the type that go to trial.
Mhm.
So Richard, how do you kind of determine your fee structure? Do you say, well, this is a big case that potentially down the road could be a big hit, let's take a percentage? Or do you say, well, this is probably not so much, let's take an hourly percentage? How do you go about that as a personal injury attorney?
So all of my cases are contingency fee basis. It's the industry standard 1/3 of any recovery, any verdict, et cetera. It's just a 1/3 fee. Now, the way that works is that's a 1/3 fee once the client signs if we settle it in a month, or that's a 1/3 fee if I take it for 3-4 years and go all the way through trial and put the work in. And sometimes I've run into an issue where a case settles very quickly and the client's like, that's a really big fee. You hardly did any work on this. It's like, well, that's the business model.
Well,
You signed a fee agreement.
and they're also paying for 30 years worth of expertise.
Well, that's true too. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny saying that. My father is an oral surgeon, and when he would extract a wisdom tooth, he would do it in about 2 or 3 minutes. And the patient, once he told me a story, a patient looks at him and it's like, how much money do you get for that? And he would tell him, it's like, for 2 or 3 minutes, it's like, you're not paying for that 2 or 3 minutes, you're paying for the 40 years of experience.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Could you maybe give like the top 2, 3, or top 5 things that you would recommend if someone's seriously hurt? Like what do they need to know? Like what are some of the, advice, attributes that you'd give someone, a friend or someone that you would say these are the things you just have to know and have to ask for?
So I have a tagline. I'm going to say that because it's critical to what I'm about to say. I have a somewhat flippant tagline. It's called "The time to call is as you fall."
Okay.
And it's a little flippant, but it encapsulates a really important concept. I want people to call me immediately. And the reason I want them to call me immediately is for exactly the question you just asked, Mark. It is when you are injured, document, document, document. I don't care if someone says they're injured. I don't care if they say, I don't need to go to the hospital. I don't want to treat. I want them going to the hospital. I want them going to their physician. I want them documenting what happened and anything that bothers them. Because a great example of that is, let's say that you injure your back and you just say, I'm a tough person. I don't need to go to the hospital. 5 months later, that back injury gets worse. Now suddenly you go to the doctor, you go to the hospital and you say, they take a history. Every medical professional takes a history and you say, well, it all started 5 months ago. Now you've lost a little bit of a causal connection. And then the insurance company finds out that you are in some sort of heavy physical labor profession, like let's say you're a bricklayer or a mason. And now they're going to say, well, 5 months went by, it wasn't documented. During those 5 months you're working. How do we know you didn't wrench your back carrying cement around? So document, document, document with respect to the injuries. The other thing is, let's face it, we deal with slip and falls on ice and snow. Ice and snow melt. Ice and snow get treated with salt. Take a picture. Defects get fixed. You trip on something, it gets fixed. Now, in law, you cannot show pictures of a subsequent remedial measure. If somebody fixes it, it's an evidentiary thing. But the point is, you need to document the actual defect because it may not be there the next day. So that's why I always tell clients and people, the time to call is as you fall, because I want things documented.
Richard, just to follow up on that, I mean, with obviously everybody and their brother has an iPhone or a smartphone with a camera on it. There's technology everywhere. There's cameras, there's closed caption, I mean, everything. So I'm sure it's changed a lot from when you started actually litigating cases, and both, defense and as a plaintiff. But is that something that you always have to have in the background, almost like an inspector? I was just watching The Money Heist, for example, is on Netflix, and all the cameras and the documentation. But is it a different world now with the way that companies and individuals or random videos out there that could just totally make or break a case?
Well, I think for me, it's on my side, it's more helpful, Mark, because people are more likely with a cell phone, they're immediately going to take a picture of the defect, the condition over which they tripped, the condition that caused them. At a car collision, they might take pictures of the scene of the collision, things like that. They're going to get those pictures. I guess, the worst case scenario is somebody claims later on that they're injured, and then someone shows up with cell phone video from the scene of the collision where they're running around yelling at the other driver, and then they're saying that, you know, they injured their back. And so I haven't run into that, and frankly, I try to weed that out. I really focus on trying to make sure that I get, you know, honest clients with respect to their injuries. I had a case early on in my career when I went out on my own, and you know, that's one of my first cases. You take anything. It was an individual that had ordered a salad from a prominent food chain and was eating a salad and bit down on what he said was a small machine screw, and he chipped his teeth and it cracked his tooth and he had to go to the dentist. And I was like, okay. So we take the case and we're negotiating not huge amounts of money. And then he wanted a little more money than the company was willing to offer. So the company said, okay, we want to get his dental records and his medical records. So I asked him, okay, they want your medical records. Can you sign this release? And I said, do you have anything to worry about? Is there anything in the records we have to worry about? He says, no, no, no. We get the records, and 2 weeks before the date of the incident, he's at the dentist complaining of a cracked tooth. And so it's two things. First of all, he's lying to me. Second of all, he's believing his own lies. I gave him the out and he didn't take it. But those are the types of cases I try to weed out. But that's the type of thing, you know, early on in the career you take that. I just always laugh about that case.
Do the insurance companies hire people like, you know, again, this is Hollywood type stuff, but they sit in vans, you know, and videotape people and try to do the gotcha?
Oh, yes, they do. The insurance company will hire investigators to follow them around, to try to videotape them doing things to get their level of activity. You find that it's more typical in workers' compensation cases, but it does happen in personal injury cases. I haven't had that happen with respect to an insurance company with one of my clients, but I remember when I was doing defense work, very funny story. We had a case where our client rear-ended the plaintiff, and I'm talking hard, probably 40 miles an hour. And the plaintiff basically said, was claiming loss of consortium because she couldn't have relations with her husband anymore. She was claiming that she couldn't lift her arm above her shoulder because of the injuries. And she also said at her deposition, I remember these words, I'm a white-knuckled driver. You would not want to be driving behind me because I'm really slow. So we hire an investigator and we find out the following. Her husband's in prison. Well, that would really put a serious crimp on your relationship. We catch her watering a hanging planter with her arm all the way up here. And the investigator was driving up Route 3 from the South Shore into Boston behind her. He said he could barely keep up. He actually
95 miles an hour.
It was like 80, 85 miles an hour. It was priceless. We got a defense verdict on a rear end collision.
Wow.
Because it's a classic case of what I tell people is pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And this woman was being a hog.
Can on maybe a John or Jane Doe basis, could you talk about your most exciting case that you had?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Mark.
Sorry, Chris. We're lagging a little bit. On a John or Jane Doe basis, could you maybe talk about your most exciting case that you ever worked on?
You know, I'm going to tell you my most exciting case was a case where the woman was an employee of a company. She was at one of their stores and they were rearranging the store, and they moved a table, exposed a depressed area of the floor. She never saw it, and she fell because she stepped into and lost her balance, and she fractured her kneecap. Now, she claimed workers' compensation first, and actually at the time I was doing workers' compensation, so I represented her through that, and we got her a great settlement for that part of it. But workers' comp is easy on the liability. It just has to happen during the course and scope of employment. So we were able to pursue a third-party case because typically you can't do that. If you get workers' comp from the employer, you can't sue the employer as a third-party case. But in this case, her employer played shell games, corporate shell games. So instead what we did was we sued the corporate entity that owned the building and the corporate entity that was the landlord, because there was different corporate entities than the one that actually paid her, even though it was ownership in reality was all the same. So because they had set up separate corporate structures, we were able to do it. And then we got her a great settlement there. And the reason I say that was my most exciting case was it really changed her life. I mean, this was a woman who was the sole supporter for her and her husband. Her husband was unable to work. He was on Social Security disability. And she was the one that brought home the money. And this shattered their lives with respect to everything. And when we settled the case, the actual underlying third-party case, it enabled them to continue with their dreams and to buy their retirement piece of land and build their house that they always wanted to do. So that's why it was exciting to me. And I still remember I used to go out to their home all the time to do everything because it was hard for her to move around. So anytime I needed documents or we needed to meet, I would go there. I think during the course of the case, I probably visited them probably 25 or 30 times. And I remember the last time I went out was to deliver the check. And I looked at them and I said, I want you to know what I'm about to say. I'm saying in the most loving way possible, but I really hope I never see you again. You know, but it was just wonderful. It's like, that's the type of person.
As you got into, this type of, law work, did you ever expect that those type of feelings, obviously you go in, kind of chasing the dollar, but, obviously there's some significant good coming out of it at times?
No, so when I started in insurance defense, so I really didn't have that personal connection with the plaintiffs. To me, I looked at cases and I looked at them like an insurance company looks at them. It's all about numbers. It's business. Oh, you tore your ACL. We see 1,000 of those a year from the insurance company perspective. We have a bell curve. They should be worth between 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviations away from this number. When I went out on my own, this was one of the first cases I had, the larger ones, where I actually felt really good. It was really wonderful to have that feeling that I really helped somebody. I really changed their lives. And it's a great feeling. And frankly, I wasn't expecting it. It just developed along the way because you develop relationships with your clients all throughout the case. And in this one, it was more than just a third-party case. I was dealing with her workers' compensation case too. So all in all, it's probably about 4 years from start to finish.
And who's got the biggest target, I guess? Is it the insurance company you go after? Is it the company or the business you go after? Where do you throw the arrows?
So the arrow technically goes at the business, but you want to make sure it's at the insurance company is the money. So you will sue in the name of the business or in the name of the individual, and you'll name that person. But really what you're after is the deep pocket. You're after that insurance company money. And, that's the policy is what you're after. And along those lines, sometimes, especially with respect to, say, an auto collision, the policy may not be sufficient for the damages. And I've had cases where the damages far exceeded the policy. But you typically, to get personal money out of someone is virtually impossible. Your house is protected by statute. They may, what are you going to levy their wages for $5 a week for the next 50 years? Realistically speaking, you take whatever the policy is and you just move on. So I always tell people and clients when I meet with them, a lawsuit, a case is a tripod. It has 3 legs. If you're missing one leg, like a tripod, it falls over. You need liability, you need damages, and you need a pocket. If you can, and if you have 2 out of 3, that's great, but it's not going to get you there. You're going to fall over.
Richard, that's got to be somewhat hard because if you run a small business, you look at those insurance premiums coming in, everybody's trying to get away with the minimum, I think most times, unless they, have significant assets they're trying to protect. But what happens? I would think you do run into people that are underinsured. They don't have the right type of policy, the right type of stuff. And then that's really, from what I hear, that's your limit. That's what you're working with. Right?
Yeah, right. Correct, Mark. So typically you run into that more on the personal situation, not so much on the commercial situation. So the personal situation being an auto collision would be a great example, where somebody may only have $50,000 and $100,000, which is $50,000 per person, $100,000 per incident. Which is why I tell people constantly all the time that you should have on your auto insurance, there's a portion of your auto insurance called under and uninsured coverage. And you can raise that to the level of your liability limits. And I tell people, raise your liability to $250,000, $500,000, so you can raise that underinsured to $250,000, $500,000. So the way that works is, if the other person only has $50,000 and you have $250,000 in underinsured, you can then get another $200,000 from your insurance company. So you're protecting yourself. Because let's face it, Massachusetts, the compulsory minimum is $20,000. New Hampshire, I don't believe there is a minimum. And
Yeah.
with my luck, I figure if I'm hit by somebody, it's going to be by one of those people.
I got undocumented legal alien and someone from New Hampshire in the same year.
There you go.
Yeah, it was fun. Good times. And then what about on the business side for our small business owners and people that listen to this podcast across the country? You're running a business. Like, what are some of the types of coverages that people definitely have to have?
Well, they definitely need the liability, obviously, property and casualty. And we're learning now with COVID-19, there's they need to really look at their business continuation coverage and their business interruption coverage. But, from my perspective, what I deal with is they should have liability insurance. Liability insurance is not that expensive in the scheme of things, and it really provides a lot of protection. In my networking group, I know a number of people that do commercial insurance, and, one of them always says, his tagline is, call me when the what ifs keep you up at night. If you're a business owner and you're sitting there wondering, what if there's a flood? What if there's a fire? What if someone gets injured on my premises? Insurance is there to protect you. I mean, my personal beliefs about insurance is about catastrophic injuries. Insurance is about catastrophe. I don't mind small deductibles. I don't mind paying out small amounts of money, but I want to be protected from the catastrophe. And small business owners and even larger business owners should, in my view, should think the same way. And I once, way back in another networking group, there was an insurance person there who used to say all the time, if you don't know insurance, you better know your agent. And frankly, if you don't know insurance, you better know your agent, because you need to trust that agent is going to give you the right insurance. Because if you get a policy from one agent or one broker, and then you go compare it with another one, they might shave $50 off. That $50 could be critical coverage that you might one day need, and it's not worth it. So you need to really trust and know your agent.
Interesting.
Richard, as we kind of move back into a new norm, and from what I can see, at least I know personally, I'm not going to be driving nearly as much. Does that weigh on the other side? Is that bad for business?
Well, I mean, I guess it's arguably bad for business in the sense that there's fewer collisions. I always, when I get questions like this, I always have to tell people, when I get a case, when somebody calls me up, I feel like I have an angel and a devil, one on each shoulder. Someone calls me up and says, I was just in a really bad car collision. And the devil's like, I'm going to go with the angel first. The angel's like, are you okay? I hope you're okay. I hope you're not injured. And the devil's like, oh, I hope you're injured. I hope you're really badly hurt. It's terrible. It's really terrible. But that's, obviously what's good for me as business-wise is bad for the client. But, with respect to the fewer car collisions, that we'll see where that ends up, frankly. This is a 2 or 3 month bubble, we'll call it. And that's not statistically long enough to really impact business that much. We'll see where it goes. And besides, a lot of my work is I do bicycle collisions too, and there's a lot of bikes out on the road these days. So,
yeah, I bet you could have never expected that. Let's say dial it back 10 years ago. That ain't pretty much anywhere you look in the city.
No, sorry.
He has a brain injury from a car accident. I can hear it. You're really lagged. It's something with Zoom today is not working for us, unfortunately, but we're definitely getting a lot of great content. I just would like to remind everyone that you can follow us at the shrimptankpodcast.com/Boston for this show, which has a little bit of technical issues, but we're working through it just like we are with COVID and pivoting. Again, we're nationally syndicated through iHeart. You can see we have something like 1,000 episodes that you can download. Richard, for those of our listeners who want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out to you? And we'll obviously be putting your links and your bios post-show, but could you maybe let us know the best way to get a hold of you?
So am I allowed to give out a cell phone number?
You're absolutely allowed to do whatever you want.
Because I tell people the best way to reach me is by cell phone, especially in this day and age where I'm really not in the office that much. My cell phone number is a very simple number. It's 617-LAWFLIX, LAWFLIX. It's pretty easy to remember. But, email is also great. And that information, you're going to put my cell phone and email up on that. Those are the 2 best ways to reach me.
Great. Well, on behalf of Chris and myself, we'd like to thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties today.
Thank you very much.
It happens, but great content, and And we wish you all the luck in your business. We hope to have you back someday.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity, and technical issues keep it fun and interesting and keep you on your toes.
Sense of humor. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, guys.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.